It is interesting to note that at the beginning of in the early part of her speech, she stated that we cannot waste money on lots and lots of different groups of people, including the rich. And then at the last part of her speech, she says the rich people really, really matter. Clearly, the opposition does not have a clear idea of whether or not the rich people do matter in their case. Whatever it is, I'm not that concerned, because my primary interest group is importers and it's the middle class. And I'll be telling you how. In this debate, both sides kind of agree with a few key things. And the question is, what's the best way to achieve those objectives? And so, let me go on to my 3 main points of contention. Firstly, I'll be talking about the affordability of the policy. Secondly, I'll be talking about the target groups. And lastly, I'll be talking a bit about what is the best way of going about it. So first, on to the idea of the affordability of the policy. Now, the last opposition speaker just talked about how, our budget is finite, we cannot spend it here, we cannot spend it there. Yet, it seems very clear to me that she has forgotten very basic macroeconomics, which is this. During times of recession, you run deficit financing. You are willing to spend beyond your means, so that when times get better and times are of plenty, then you can run a surplus and accrue reserves. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I put forth to you the idea that the reserves which Singapore currently has are A, substantial, and B, able to be used right here, right now. And so I tell you that during this time of recession, when people are suffering, when importers and the middle income are suffering, that it is this time that the government should make full use of the reserves that's accrued during times of plenty. Secondly, the idea that somehow if we lower GST now, it will not really boost spending because of the fact that, it's not really targeted, it's a very small amount, is really insignificant because of the fact that when GST is applied to such broad things as utilities, as everyday essentials, as fuel prices, then I tell you that to an everyday consumer, it actually amounts to quite a lot. And when there is the increase in disposable income, which can then be spent on other essentials, I tell you that this increase in spending across the broad section of society means that the economy can then be brought back under control, and that will actually be set back on the path to normalcy. And gentlemen, clearly she never actually listened to the elaboration of the extension which my first speaker clearly stated. So let's go on to the second contention, that on target groups. Now, I'm not sure why she kind of says that we have to decrease the corporate tax for importers and not worry about operating costs. Because the fact remains that for importers, we have, as my first speaker stated, 2 main concerns. That is our earnings and that is our consumer base. And we recognize that the best way to protect our consumer base is to actually cut GST on essential goods. She never really rebutted that. In fact, she never really talked about what is so bad about having lower GST for importers. Secondly, that on the rich, well, I've already stated the contradiction, so I'm not going to elaborate on that. And as for now, the sandwich class. Ladies and gentlemen, this notion has been bandied about in this debate so much that it's becoming very annoying because they forget one key issue. That the notion of class is something that is constantly in flux. Due to the fact, in a moment, sir, that there are salary cuts and that there are job cuts, that what we consider middle income now will, in the very near future, become the lower middle income and maybe even the poor at the very end. Yes, sir.
So tell me why I should place the interest of private companies such as importers over my very own people, because the GST cut will result in income tax increase.
Thank you, sir. You have not been listening to my first speaker. If you cut GST for the importers, that means importers do not need to raise prices on their imports, which means they do not need to raise prices and therefore protect the consumer base. So you see, if you help the importers, you help the consumers, and in the end it's a win-win situation for all. So, back to my point. That's on the idea that the middle income is rapidly becoming the lower middle income and it's constantly in flux. Therefore, the best bet is to protect the large section of society by giving them a big GST cut. So lastly, let me now sum up by talking about what is the best policy to pursue. Now, both sides agree that we have to boost spending. Both sides agree that people need to be able to afford to buy the essentials they need to live a dignified life. And both sides agree that the government has to spend some sort of money. The question then is this: where should the locus of control lie? Should it lie in the hands of the government and its bureaucracy and its manifold inefficiencies and administrative costs and so on, by giving targeted assistance which will probably be hoarded and not be used anyway? Or should it be given to people so that they can choose what are the essential goods they want to buy, they need to buy, so that they are the people who can do better budgeting because they are the ones who know best about the increase in disposable income? I put forth to you the idea that at the end of the day, if you provide the consumers themselves with this control over their finances, so they do not need to rely on the government so much. But so they are the ones who are in control of their own spending because they know the prices of goods which have been reduced from GST, and that is the best solution of all.